Lately, I find myself wondering less about what AI can actually do, and more about what it's showing us. Not about the technology itself, about us. The reaction it triggers feels actually bigger than the economic stuff would explain. And the longer I sit with it, the more it feels like something quite old. What I want to explore today is not AI as a technological event, but as a mirror. And specifically, what this collective reaction around AI is actually telling us about the parts of ourselves that we've pushed away for a long time. Most people who have encountered Jung, they know the shadow, but fewer have really sat with what he meant by the collective unconscious. And right now, I think that's the more important concept. So what is that about? According to Jung, the personal layer of the unconscious is something we're developing through our experience, our relationships. But Jung also says that we are entering this world not as an empty disk. There's already something from before that is part of our identity. And this can include shared values, beliefs, and stories. It's something we all have in common as a species, as a civilization. This space is where the archetypes live. These are the ancient patterns that have been running through human experience for as long as we've been human. Nobody invented these, nobody owns them. They are our all heritage. Now, the collective psyche has also its own shadow. And in contrast to the personal shadow that contains our own suppressed experiences, the collective shadow contains the accumulated material that we as a culture have pushed out of its conscious awareness. And when that shadow is activated, the reaction is disproportionate. It is intense and difficult to reason with. Right now, we're seeing such a shadow activation with AI. And here it gets specific and uncomfortable. So our Western industrial culture, and we're talking here roughly about the last 3 centuries, we made a series of choices about what to value and about what to suppress. We choose speed over slowness, measurable output over unmeasurable depths, rational optimization over symbolic thinking, and efficiency over meaning. And I'm saying that without any judgment. But I think it's worth to understand what we are trading for what. Let's be very clear here. These were not random choices. Actually, they were enormously productive choices. They built our modern world, the world we live in today. But every choice about what to value is at the same time a choice about what to push away into the shadow. So what are the things that went into the collective shadow? Slowness, contradiction, the irrational, the embodied, the symbolic, the capacity to sit with not knowing. And then, with extraordinary efficiency, we build a machine that embodies everything we kept. The fast, the rational, the optimized, the tireless, judgment without empathy, output without exhaustion. We didn't build AI despite our cultural values. We built it from them. And artificial intelligence is the logical endpoint of 3 centuries of collective choices about what matters. And now we're afraid of it, at least to some extent. Jung called that enantiodromia. It's the principle that what you push to an extreme eventually flips into its opposite. The thing you worship most completely becomes the thing you fear most. We were worshipping functionality for 3 centuries. And ultimately, we got something that functions perfectly. Now we see a reaction, not an individual one. The collective psyche is producing exactly the reaction Jung would have predicted. That's why I'm telling you. Your unease is not irrational. This is your shadow that is telling you something is wrong. And the shadow is always pointing at something real, and it's worth listening to it. Not to accept everything it says, but to reflect and to reconsider our choices. And eventually we can also confirm them. So here is the question worth sitting with. When people describe to me what unsettles them about AI, and I'm not talking about the economic concern, I'm talking about the deeper unease. What do they actually describe? They describe something that works without needing rest, that produces without needing meaning, and that optimizes without needing to understand why. Now, ask yourself, where have you seen that description before? That is the description of you. The description of the ideal professional worker that Western culture has been producing and rewarding for decades. That's how your boss wants you to have, how you show up in your LinkedIn profile. A person who delivers without complaint, who performs without showing uncertainty, who optimizes without asking whether the optimization is worth it and makes sense. We didn't invent those qualities for a machine. We encoded them from ourselves, from the professional ideal we've been performing for most of our working lives. That is why the AI system is not alien to us. We took what we valued, and we removed everything we were quietly ashamed of needing. The doubt, the exhaustion, the need for meaning, the fact that sometimes we simply don't know. And we handed it back to us in perfection. That is what creates the unease. You can't reason someone out of a confrontation with their own shadow. Now, let me tell you something personal, and if you saw my other videos, you will know already, but I've kept the dream journal for around 8 years now. Because I felt that question, that unease already long before. That there is something that I or we locked away that needs to be heard. And what I've seen, and I mean both in my own dreams, but also in the material that's shared with me by the professionals I work with, is usually the same pattern. The shadow never appears as something disconnected. It appears as something familiar. That can be a relative, a friend, a place, or a story we know very well. For me personally, something felt hollow long before AI was part of any conversation. That's why I quit a 15-year corporate career and moved my family to Mexico with a one-way ticket. So we went all in. Sure, there was also risk in it. But this decision and the period that followed helped me to understand my own personal and collective shadow material. And it helped me to strip away a large part of the persona, the mask that I was wearing in order to perform and function. In my role and in our society. When all of that falls apart from one day to the next, the emails, the meetings, the feeling of being important, it opens a void. But what I found in this void wasn't emptiness. It was the question I'd been too productive to ask. It was the slowness, the symbolic thinking, the willingness to sit down with not knowing, about spirituality and meaning. These questions hadn't disappeared. They never do. They're just sitting there and waiting. That's the cultural shadow at an individual level. The AI disruption is doing exactly that for a lot of people right now, involuntarily, and faster than they're ready for it. The reaction or the first instinct you have is to rebuild the structure immediately, to learn new skills, a new positioning, new ways to be marketable. But that instinct is resuppression. It's just trying to fill the silence before you've heard what it's actually saying. So let me be clear about what's happening right now, because I think the current conversation is misreading it almost entirely. The standard response to AI disruption is, you have to adapt, you have to reskill. You have to find what AI can do and do more of that. And that's not even wrong, but it's addressing the surface while the deeper question goes unanswered. The deeper question, the one the collective shadow is actually forcing, is this. What did we suppress in the process of becoming the professionals we became? What did we trade away to be efficient and optimizable? What parts of ourselves did we push into the shadow because they didn't fit the image we needed to project? Jung also had a concept for that. He called it the cultural canon. It's the set of values a civilization officially endorses. And he observed that every cultural canon produces a corresponding cultural shadow. These are the values that get systematically suppressed because they don't fit. So what is the cultural canon of the last 3 centuries? Productivity, efficiency, rational control, measurable output, optimization. What is the corresponding cultural shadow? depth, slowness, symbolic thinking, embodied wisdom, the capacity to not know. Now AI has made the cultural canon redundant. It suddenly performs the canon better than we do. And by doing so, it has forced the cultural shadow into visibility. Suddenly the suppressed qualities are the only ones that can't be replicated. That's the psyche doing what it always does when a one-sided position is pushed to its extreme. It compensates. Remember, enantiodromia. It forces the shadow into light. So the AI disruption is, in a very precise Jungian sense, a compensatory event. Our collective unconscious is correcting for a century-long imbalance. Now, the collective shadow doesn't stay abstract. It lands in specific people, in specific careers, or in specific moments of quiet dread at 2 a.m. in the morning. And what I've observed in my work with my clients, helping them through exactly this kind of disruption, usually the people most destabilized are not the ones whose jobs are most at risk. They are the ones who build their entire sense of professional worth around the qualities that AI now performs. Engineers, marketing, analysts. When those qualities are suddenly available on demand, and almost for free, the professional identity doesn't just feel threatened. It feels annihilated, because the persona and the self has been fused for so long that the person can no longer tell them apart. That fusion is where the shadow work actually begins. Which part of your identity were genuinely yours? And which parts did you adopt because they were rewarded and because they kept the shadow quiet? Now, Jung observed something that I find truly hopeful and optimistic. That the shadow, when it comes into visibility, when it comes up, it is not a catastrophe. It's actually an opportunity for integration. An opportunity that wasn't available before. The qualities that went into the cultural shadow are precisely what AI cannot replicate. Because they emerge from lived, embodied human experience. And this is something that can't be compressed into training data. There are already signs showing that this is happening. The renewed interest in depth psychology, specifically in Jung, among people who would never have described themselves as interested in psychology 5 years ago. I also see growing conversations about meaning, about slowness, about mindfulness, about what makes work worth doing beyond its output. Or the simple fact that this video exists and that you're watching it. These are not just trends, they're compensatory movements. It's our collective psyche that's pushing back toward balance. So this moment demands integration. But it is not about rejecting AI. It's more about reclaiming what we suppressed in the process of building it. What can you do now with this information? I'm not going to give you a framework or checklist or a life hack here, because I think they don't work. But I'll give you one question. And it is not the obvious one. Think of a colleague, someone you worked with closely, someone you quietly judged for going too deep, or taking too long, for being too uncertain, or too symbolic, or too hard to evaluate. Someone whose way of working made you slightly impatient. What specifically bothered you about them? That irritation is the shadow. What you judged in them is what you suppressed in yourself. Because the professional environment rewarded you for suppressing it. And what you suppressed is precisely what AI cannot replicate. Answer this question actively and thoroughly. Ideally, take a notebook. Write down the name, you don't have to show it to anyone, and write down explicitly what bothered you. And one sentence is enough, or how much you want. Usually it takes a while, but when it starts coming up, you can write more probably. Just that. And what shifts in the day after that is that you stop asking what AI is taking from you. And you start asking what you gave away long before AI arrived. And that is where the integration begins. Carl Jung once said, the most dangerous thing about the shadow is not what it contains. It is the certainty that it belongs to someone else. The collective unease around AI is real. And also the economic pressures are real. And I'm not asking you to dismiss any of that. But the intensity of the reaction, the civilizational scale of it, is telling us something the economic framing can't explain. We built AI for what we valued. And now it's showing us what we left out. That's the whole story. The individuation it demands begins with one simple move. Stop projecting onto the mirror and start reading what it actually shows. I hope this was valuable. Let me know what landed for you in the comments. I'm really curious in reading all of them, and I'll see you in the next video.